You gotta fight for your right.
I don't think it's that kind of podcast, Nick.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, this is legacy approved. I had a vision before them folks had a clue. Thank God I still had ability when we didn't have a roof. I couldn't even think of stability, let alone had the tools to be making change, and it ain't that ancient a memory. Strange that I can't forget where I came, but don't know if they'll do the same and remember me till I'm painting a bigger picture, making some bigger figures. I can't get stuck in that lane, that's deep, it'll be delivered. Trust me. I've been working and mercy, Lord, trusting my process of monies, looking for progress and pushing forward. Know I might fall while I'm running. I pick myself up sometimes and pay that pressure no mind. Cause ain't no way I can work this hard, and I know my time is coming.
Welcome to our first episode of Perspective LP podcast, episode number 1. I am Dr. Nick Sturdivant. Happy to be here with my two brothers, Esteban Hernandez, Larry Burrell. Now, we're three professionals in this field. We've been doing this for some years now. We're on the ground from person to person, direct family care, to the administrative piece, to working with collaterals and shareholders, all within the industry, dealing with political influences, community-based influences, a ton of different things that we're going to talk about. We're happy that you're here with us. We have some direct experience that's really going to bode well and showing some and highlighting and exposing some things that we need people to understand in the mental health community, in the mental health space. So let me just say this for everybody who's watching. What we're doing on this first episode, we are purposely jumping all over, touching on different topics. We're not really going deep, we're just scratching the surface. We're really wanting to just give you all a framework of where we're headed as a podcast, some of the things we're gonna be talking about. And we're gonna dive deep. It's gonna get uncomfortable at times because there's information that we need to expose about our system of care, what's going on within the communities and within the families that we're working with, so that we can actually get better. But I'll let you guys kind of talk about your experience. What are some things that you're seeing in the industry, some things that you're seeing in the field, and specifically how it is actually impacting our communities, whether it's black, white, brown, whatever. All these things that, nothing's off the table.
I get to go first.
Hey.
This is great. I think the biggest thing for me that's kind of been like highlighted over the last couple of weeks, especially as the regional director at LifePush, just having the opportunity to sit around a table with other professionals, making decisions as to like what services to provide for youth and families. One of the things that has become very much evident to me is how underserved the Latino community is. It's hard because a lot of the times I'm the only representation they get in those big decision-making tables,
Right.
So it's hard seeing the language barrier that they so often face, the misunderstood cultural perspectives that they have, because obviously every culture does things a little bit differently. But when you have a Latino family coming into these tables looking for help, when somebody doesn't understand the culture that they're coming from, it kind of becomes that disconnect. And so often I'm the only one that's there,
Right.
So,
That's interesting you say that, because in the black community, I see it the same as a black male in the field. We see the same things. Larry, you can speak to it as well. But and here's the thing. People don't like they shy away from it. But the human services in the mental health field at large is largely run by middle-aged white women, which isn't a negative thing, right? It's portrayed. It's the truth. It's what it is. The thing that gets me about it is, you have a lot of people that will try to paint that as a negative picture. Oh, it's just middle-aged white women. Well, first of all, thank you, middle-aged white women, for being in the field, right? Because at least somebody's out there trying to help.
Yep.
But it's not just middle-aged white women, but they are the majority. So we see the same thing of it. And it's something I really think a lot about. And there's some great people in this field that are really helping outside of their communities, which I think needs to be really highlighted. But to your point, there is a cultural disconnect at times, and I think we have to stop being in that place where we're scared to address it. It's not a negative, it's just reality of what it is, So Larry, when you're thinking about this topic, because you serve a wider range geographically, not just demographically, but geographically. And so you're in rural areas, urban areas, metropolitan, what are you seeing?
What I'm saying is, I think when you, like you stated, when you go from rural areas to bigger communities, is the lack of understanding, the lack of resources in certain communities. Even when it comes down to like staffing in the mental health field, I think we over the past few years seen a great change with staffing in the mental health field. I think COVID has played a lot part of that. You know, before people were in the field, they were eager to go into the homes, they were eager to be on the forefront. And then when COVID hit, it shifted things where people were working from home. And in the midst of that, people got very comfortable with working from home. And then when it was time to go back into the field, people who were working from home did not want to go back into the field. And so I think you've seen a larger shift now, which has happened where I'll say turnover has really, damaged the mental health field from providers to case managers, probation officers. And so now I think we're seeing a gap because, now you've had people who had longevity who have been in the mental health field, whether from a DSS perspective, school perspective, court service perspective. And now some of those individuals who had the experience, who had the knowledge, they retired or they stepped away from the field, whether it's even COVID or even after COVID. And so then you have a different generation that's coming in now they have the educational experience, but they don't have the professional experience or the development experience of being like in the field. And so now what we're seeing is a gap. And so then what ends up happening now, you're seeing a increase in caseloads because there is a lack of workers to actually handle those caseloads. And so when you're taking 15, 20 plus caseload and putting it on somebody else who hasn't been in the field for a long period of time, what ends up happening now is those individuals get burnt out quickly or they're resigning. And then those caseloads have to go to somebody else who's coming in new. And so it caused a breakdown in the mental health community, in the mental health field. So that's what I've been seeing a lot of just as a whole, which I think is really kind of hurt. But I feel like that's something that, I'm hoping that we can kind of get back to the experience in the field.
That's a real thing. Where my mind goes, especially being president of a mental health agency, is what is the leadership doing with that, right? So you have very limited, contrary to what many people believe, you have very limited influence on if somebody's going to stay or go. If they're going to leave, they're going to leave. That's what it is, right? And yes, you hear the whole people don't quit their jobs, they quit their supervisors. It's a real thing. There's merit to it. But what I am seeing, and I don't know if you all are seeing this in your journeys, a lot of times you'll have supervisors who are watching their team slowly dwindle away, turn over and move on, and they just stay behind their desks. They don't get out and get into the field. And it's like the medieval times. Like you have the king that fought with the army, and you have the king that just sat on the throne and let the army do what they did, And it's just crazy to see that. And because of this, and then from my experience, people are falling through the cracks now because the work's not getting picked up. People have a limited shelf life of what they can do in a certain amount of time.
And I think the crazy part, one of the things to like piggyback off of that too that I've seen is, and you mentioned it, is how overwhelmed new staff gets at the beginning because they are of a younger generation. A lot of them is like their first level entry job into like the field, whether it is as a case manager or service provider or whatever the case may be. They come into it bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, like they're excited, they want to make a difference.
And you just gotta shake your head like you have no idea what you are.
And then they get put like 20 cases from the jump, and then they look at all 20 cases and they're like, this is not what I signed up for. So then that leads to turnover, that leads to all these other things as well. So
I call it that figurative punch in the face. Like they come in, they're ready to go, the books told me this, my professor told me this. And I'm just like, you might as well throw all of that out the window because...
But when you can take that figurative punch in the face and take it in the chin and come out of it, then we can see some good people come into the field, So
Esteban, this is going to be more for you because obviously in our system of care, people getting served, having needs that are in the system is largely minorities. Now, let's be very clear. There's whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, all ethnicities are represented who are getting assistance, whether it's through DSS, SNAP, food stamps, or whatever the case may be, community-based services, assistance. So this is not, let me be very clear, services are not limited and pigeonholed to Black or brown communities. It's across the board. The numbers would support that as well. I'll tell you a story. My son's big into soccer. He's really growing really quickly. I'm really impressed with it. And so this year, the team that he was on, he really got connected to a large Latino community. And so I was telling my wife, we spent more time with the Latino community than any other community this past year. Doing that, I've really learned a lot about the Latino culture. And it's crazy because the Black and brown culture, the Black and Latino culture are actually quite similar in a lot of ways with some key differences. And from my perspective, the biggest difference is, or the biggest similar, very similar, hardworking, capable, very innovative. We know how to figure things out. The biggest thing that I'm seeing, though, is the lack of unity in the Black community as compared to the Latino community. And to the point, so from the outside looking in, the Latino community is very close-knit. They're very tight-knit. When they come out to the games, when they come out to the practices, they're coming out as a whole family, whole family unit. And if they're not a whole family unit, they're on the way. Dad's getting off work, he's on his way. Like, they're going to be there. It's a beautiful thing to see. That reminds me of what the Black community used to be. And I think the Black community is still there in some regards, but in our defense, the media shows a certain depiction of the Black community. They don't show the other part, the part that's still wholesome, that's still family oriented. And so, but I will say the bigger piece is there's a unity amongst the Latino population that I don't think is wholeheartedly there in the Black community anymore. From a Latino man's perspective, what are you seeing? Is it matching up?
Yes. And I like how you said the family unity aspect of things, because that is very much like a predominant trait that is within the Latino community. When we have carne asadas and stuff, we out there for like all night long. The party don't stop till like 2-3 in the morning, But it's because the whole family gets together. Like, nobody gets excluded, nobody gets left behind. You have aunts and uncles, tios, tias, all that other stuff that just I have cousins that I never even met that pull up to a party and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm your cousin," and I'm like, "Cool, word, what's up, fam?" So there is a very strong sense of family community, like the whole "it takes a village," like that is very much evident in the Latino community. I think on that opposite side of that same coin, while we're so like tight knit together as a family, we don't necessarily take help from other organizations, people, whatever, very well, because we're very much like, we'll handle this ourselves. Like, we got it, we got the supports in place. But when it comes to, for example, like services and having providers come into it, or just other supports from the surrounding community, that's when we're a little bit more reserved and we're like, nah, we're good. Like, we'll take care of things ourselves, So I think there definitely needs to be more of an openness to have those kinds of conversations, that it's okay to ask for help from outside of the family, because Tio Juan is not going to know anything about mental health, So having that outside perspective is something that I think the Latino community genuinely needs to work towards too, and be okay with having those conversations. So
one thing I'm seeing in my journey when we're talking about going into the homes, talking with families, but also how that translates into case management, where there's social services or a court service unit or a mental health facility or CSB that they call it in Virginia. When I'm looking at this, the stats show that parents or homes that have two parents in them typically produce more prepared kids. Not that you can't do it in a one-parent household, because I know a lot of great people, powerful people have come from one-parent household systems. It's interesting when I'm talking to the community, folks in the community that are receiving services. There's this war going on between, I don't need a man in the home, or these women are no good. And then it always comes down to the same argument. Well, what if there were no men in the world? What if there were no females in the world? Well, the fact is, if there was one without the other, the world would be shot. This whole thing of women can run the world without men, we don't need a man. That's BS, really. Like, all societies were built on the backs of men. This is the fact, right? If you look throughout history. Now, societies that thrive because of the women. You can't have one without the other. You can have a society that sustains, but it's not going to thrive without the women. You won't have a foundational footprint to put down without the men. And so you have this piece at the basic grassroots level of the family unit, but now it's even extended into the same people that are the systems that are supposed to help these same families. So now you have case managers who come from homes, who come from things that have never been rectified, has never been addressed. And you have case managers. This is where it gets dangerous. Case managers coming in with this historical value system, these experiences that they're now projecting onto our families. It's just this cycle. Are you guys seeing anything of that?
I think so, yeah. I think kind of like what you were saying, there's this cycle that unintentionally occurs when you have even like service providers, case managers, whoever it is that's affiliated with the family. It's difficult when they bring their own baggage into it, you know?
Right.
Because then that can definitely skew different decisions that are made. So it's a slippery slope if people aren't careful, for sure.
And I think too, you do see that a lot. And, now it's another gap of like where, you had, a single parent mom maybe raising the child, addressing, issues in the home, things that shifted. You have grandparents that have come into the play now that are actually stepping up as the actual parent of the family. And, the parent is either maybe absent or have other obstacles going on, that now the youth is really looking at grandparent as parent, which is now is like a generational gap. So that's what I'm seeing as well too.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
And the grandparents are getting older.
Yeah.
That hedge of protection, if you will, that filter, as they're unfortunately passing away and moving on, that generation, now you have this dysfunctional family of parents who are now the grandparents. And it's just, you can see it. And it's 10 years ago, I started beating the war drum on that about, hey guys, look, we need to prepare for this. Because once the grandparents start passing away, that filter is gone, that buffer is gone. And we're actually seeing the remnants of that happening right now.
And I think on the same note too, one of the things that I've seen working with different families within the field and stuff is when you have grandparents that are the primary caretakers that are like 60s, 70s, trying to take care of a 15-year-old. You know, that's a big generational gap because the way grandparents used to do things, it's not the same as how culture and society is nowadays. So there's this huge disconnect, and it causes the youth, the child, to just wild out, for lack of better words, to kind of just do whatever they want to do because they don't have that same level of respect towards the grandparents because there's such a big gap in between them. So it's definitely difficult.
Yeah, and I know we use like a terminology like the one up. Like now you have like the youth and the teenagers where they're one up.
They're all
a lot of that comes from like technology, like phones, things that, the grandparents can't, shut down or don't know how to operate. And so the kids are like, honestly, I'm like to say one, they're probably like 2 and 3 up on the grandparents at this day.
Or even too, like, as obviously as people age, they become less like mobile or less, their ability to go out into the community, like it becomes less. So when you have a 15-year-old that wants nothing to do but just to be out and about and do whatever they want to do, but they don't have the means to do it because the grandparents aren't able to take them out, they decide to take matters into their own hands. And then that just becomes a whole spiral of them doing what they're not supposed to be doing and then getting in trouble. And then it's a lot, man.
Yeah. And just so for you watching, for those of you who are wondering, what is this one-up terminology? And so one-up terminology actually comes from one of the services that we offer, functional family therapy. And one-up meaning, if I'm putting in generic terms, that one-up means like I have an advantage over another person in the group that I'm talking about. So if Larry is my dad and Esteban is my mom, sorry, Esteban, somebody had to be it, right? Somebody had to be it.
I mean, we are talking about 2-parent homes, so I guess, yes.
But like, so say, and I'm very technologically savvy. And my dad's always working, so he's worried about paying the bills. He knows nothing about computers or cell phones. Mom, she's really passive. She's not really going to try to tell me what to do. I'm one up on them right now because mom's not going to correct me if I'm overutilizing technology, and dad doesn't even know where to begin with how to address it. So now I'm actually one up in the situation, in the generic term, to where I'm influencing our whole scenario here. And that's something that we have to get addressed while we're doing functional family therapy. So let's talk about marriage, right? And marriage specifically and how it is impacting our system of care and how it's impacting the communities and the families that we're serving. Because I definitely see a direct correlation in what's happening. So let me drill it down. Let's talk about the value of marriage and how that impacts our system of care. What are you all seeing in that regard?
I would say, just looking at youth and families and those that come from a two-parent household that are married, you see, I'll say greater outcomes. Now, of course, just because the family's married don't mean that there's not going to be difficulties or struggles in the household. But like you were stating earlier, I think you see like greater successes or greater outcomes from the youth that have dealt with a two-parent household that are married. Mm-hmm. One thing I've seen is that, divorce, when that marriage breaks up or you add another parent in the midst of that, I think divorces or separations, it definitely creates some barriers and challenges for the youth because all their life they're used to seeing mom and dad being together. But then all of a sudden something happens and then mom and dad is no longer there. Maybe mom has her own house, dad has his own place, or, now they're living with, a different spouse or a different person. And so that causes rage, anger, depression, a lot of emotions come from things that maybe they don't really, not able to openly express to mom and dad that they really hold on internally, which then causes a ripple down effect between, the school life, home life, and their social life that I've seen working with youth and families.
Is there anything you think our system of care needs to do to recognize that better?
Yes, I think so. I think really just kind of having eyes on that a little bit better, maybe jumping on it and not waiting, because I feel like if we address it head on, then maybe we'll prevent, a long, drastic trickle down effect from the youth or the family that's involved with that.
So I'll talk a little bit about the value system from which you've experienced as a Latino man, the value system of marriage and where it was, where it is today, and how it impacts our system of care.
I think marriage is important. Family is important as a whole. I think it's one of like the core values within like the Latino community. And things definitely do get complicated when there's broken homes involved, or there's primarily a female present or a male present without the connection of the other. And I think that definitely causes a lot of like behaviors to arise from the youth. I think a lot of the times what ends up happening is if the father figure isn't around, whether it's because either like they're working or they're just not involved in the family or they're just out living their best life by themselves, it causes the next male runner-up, which is typically the eldest son, to step into that father figure role and that parental figure for the younger siblings. And it adds I'm gonna call it unnecessary stress for a developing youth to take on that burden and that responsibility to be the man of the house at 15, 16, 17 years old. That shouldn't be a responsibility that gets put on them at such a young age, but a lot of the case, it does happen.
I want to end up with a punchline. What's one punchline that you all want to leave to our viewers on what it is that we need to see in our community of service, in our communities, in our system of care for us to progress forward?
It's definitely key that, to further, help our communities, unity is going to be key. We have to put away the selfishness and difference between each other, collaborate more, take that holistic approach. If I have something to offer, if I have the one, you have the two, Nick has the three, let's put our heads together. And so we can create a solution, so we can see better results, so we can see better outcomes in our community versus everyone, fighting against each other. Because if we're all working together, we're not going to do nothing but help our communities be stronger and healthier and get them to the goal and success that they want to accomplish.
Yeah, I think for me is I'm tired of everybody working independently as silos, whether it's like communities, like the white community, black community, Hispanic community, or service providers, different people that make the decisions. Like, we will make strides towards improvement if we all just collaborate better. I think so many times people think they're the final do-all, be-all, and they got all the answers, but nobody got all the answers. Like that's why, like for me, I'm just tired of seeing people work independently, and I just feel like we need unity. We need that collaboration. We need to be together because again, we will make it further together. And I think as long as people don't grasp onto that, we'll be stuck where we're at. Whether it's communities, whether it is in the mental health field, whatever lens you want to look into it, we just need to get past our own stuff.
Yeah, I definitely think we're all on the same page because everything that we're thinking about, and including what I'm getting ready to say, it sounds like it's all centered around unity. So for me, my punchline would be we have to get away from this divisive nature of a man in the home versus a woman in the home. No, we need both. They complement each other. You thrive with both. You only survive with one, right? In a general setting. Now you have some that really thrive with one, but black versus white, brown, whatever ethnicity falls into those categories, we need to respect and appreciate that there's fundamental cultural differences in those communities and in those cultures. But like you said, we're better together. Like there's things we can glean off of each other. It doesn't have to be this versus that from a political aspect. Yes, there's some fundamental difference in their beliefs, but at the end of the day, this divisive nature is telling you, if we don't come together as a people in our communities, in our system of care as a country, we're going to crumble. There's a lot of good that has happened in this country over years. There's a lot that still needs to be fixed. And we're on a breaking point. We're on a very teetering scale that this country can crumble. And it starts with the family unit on up. And so, again, we're going to talk about all this stuff in much more detail. Last thing I want to do, I want to close every single episode out of this, especially seeing 3 strong men in a field where men typically are not in. I think we need to lead by example to see and to show the community in the world that it's okay to be caring, compassionate men who are still strong. So with that being said, Esteban, man, I love you, brother. I appreciate you doing this.
Love you too, Nick.
Larry, love you too, man.
Love you too, brother.
And guess what? We're all still strong men. We just happen to love each other. It's all good. All right. So, hey, take care. Thanks for watching. God bless. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace.
Deuces.